Heavenly Father, I pray for everyone watching this video right now. May you bless them with peace, joy, and breakthroughs in their lives. Amen. Hello, my wonderful family. I am so glad and grateful to have you here with me today. Your support means the world, and I truly don't take it for granted. Before we dive into today's powerful story, please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, drop a comment below to share your thoughts, and of course, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an update from this channel. David, I need $3,000. The words hit me like ice water as I stood in our kitchen, coffee mug halfway to my lips. My wife Elena stood in the doorway, her dark hair pulled back in the messy bun she'd been wearing for weeks now, her eyes avoiding mine just like they had for the past 14 days. 14 days since she'd last touched me. 14 days since she'd smiled at me with anything resembling warmth. 14 days of sleeping on opposite sides of our king-size bed like strangers sharing a hotel room. 3,000. I set down my mug, the ceramic clinking against the granite countertop that Elena had insisted we install last spring when everything between us still felt possible. What for? She shifted her weight, crossing her arms over the oversized sweater that had become her uniform lately. My sister's wedding deposit. The venue needs it today, or they'll give away the date. I studied her face, searching for the woman I'd married 5 years ago. The one who used to curl up next to me on Sunday mornings, who'd steal sips of my coffee and laugh when I complained. When had she become this distant stranger who only spoke to me about logistics and bills? Elena. I stepped closer, and she immediately took a step back. The rejection stung, but not as much as it used to. I was getting numb to it. We talked about this. Maria's wedding isn't until next year. Why is this suddenly urgent? Because things change, David. Her voice carried an edge I'd been hearing more often lately. Because life doesn't wait for us to get our act together. There it was again, that accusation lurking beneath her words. As if our problems were my fault. As if I was the one who'd started sleeping in pajamas that covered every inch of skin, who'd started flinching away from casual touches, who'd turned our bedroom into an Arctic wasteland of politeness and careful distance. The irony wasn't lost on me. For 2 weeks, I'd been walking on eggshells trying to figure out what I'd done wrong. Had I forgotten an anniversary? Said something thoughtless? I'd replayed every conversation, every interaction, searching for the moment everything shifted. And now she needed money. Of course she did. You know what's interesting, Elena? I leaned against the counter, studying her reaction. 2 weeks ago, when I suggested we book that couple's retreat in Vermont, you said we couldn't afford it. You said we needed to be more careful with our spending. She flushed, a pink stain spreading across her cheeks. That's different. How? Because this is for family. And what are we? The question hung between us like a loaded gun. Elena's eyes finally met mine, and for a split second, I saw something flicker there, guilt, maybe, or recognition. But then her walls slammed back up. Don't make this about us, David. This is about helping my sister. I pulled out my phone, scrolling to our joint bank account. The numbers stared back at me in stark black and white. We had the money. We'd always had the money. Elena knew that as well as I did. But something had shifted in me over these past 2 weeks. Something that had been building beneath the surface of polite smiles and careful navigation around each other's feelings. Maybe it was the counselor's voice in my head from the sessions Elena had stopped attending. Maybe it was the book I'd been reading about emotional intimacy. Or maybe I was just tired of pretending that everything was fine when it obviously wasn't. You're right, I said quietly. $3,000 is nothing compared to what we've lost. She blinked, clearly not expecting that response. What do you mean? I set my phone on the counter between us. I mean, I'll give you the money, Elena. I'll transfer it right now. But I want something in return. Her eyes narrowed. What? I want you to tell me the truth about what's really going on. Nothing's going on. 2 weeks ago, everything changed. I kept my voice calm, but my heart was hammering against my ribs. You stopped touching me. You stopped talking to me about anything that mattered. You started sleeping on your side of the bed, like I had some contagious disease. And now you need money for an emergency that isn't really an emergency. Elena's composure cracked slightly. David, I don't know what you want me to say. I want you to say what's true. I picked up my phone again, thumb hovering over the banking app. Because here's what I think is happening. I think you're testing me. I think you're seeing how long I'll chase you, how much I'll beg, how desperate I'll get before I either break down or give up entirely. The color drained from her face. That's not. I wouldn't. And the money? I continued, my voice gaining strength. The money is part of it, isn't it? You want to see if I'll still take care of you even when you won't let me close enough to breathe the same air. Elena's mouth opened and closed like she was drowning. For the first time in 2 weeks, I saw my wife, really saw her. Not the cold stranger who'd been inhabiting our house, but the frightened, confused woman I'd fallen in love with. I'll give you the money, I said, opening the app. But here's my shocking answer, Elena. After I transfer it, I'm packing a bag. Her eyes went wide. What? I'm going to stay at my brother's place for a while. Because I finally understand what you've been trying to tell me these past 2 weeks. I started typing, moving $3,000 from our savings to checking. You don't want a husband. You want a bank account with legs. David, no, that's not. And maybe you're right. I hit send, then looked up at her. Maybe that's all I've been to you for a while now. The guy who pays the bills and fixes things, and exists quietly in the background of your real life. Elena's eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, my resolve wavered. But then I remembered the past 14 nights of lying awake next to someone who treated me like a stranger. I remembered the careful distance, the polite smiles, the way she'd perfected the art of being married to someone without actually sharing a life with them. The money's transferred, I said, holding up my phone to show her the confirmation. Consider it a going-away present. David, please, you don't understand. But I was already walking past her, heading for the stairs. For the first time in 2 weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. Behind me, I heard Elena's voice, smaller now, desperate in a way that made my chest ache. Where are you going? I paused at the bottom of the stairs, my hand on the banister. I'm going to find someone who actually wants to be in the same room as me. As I climbed the stairs to pack, I could hear Elena crying in the kitchen below. Part of me wanted to turn around, to comfort her, to pretend that everything was fine just like I had been for the past 2 weeks. But a larger part of me, the part that had been suffocating slowly in our polite, distant marriage, kept walking. Because sometimes the most shocking answer isn't about money at all. Sometimes it's about finally having enough respect for yourself to stop begging for scraps of affection from someone who's supposed to love you. The real shock was that it had taken me this long to realize it. The guest bedroom at my brother Marcus's apartment smelled like stale coffee and the lavender detergent his girlfriend used. I sat on the edge of the pull-out couch, staring at my phone screen that showed 17 missed calls from Elena and a string of text messages I hadn't opened yet. You know, when you called and said you were coming over with a suitcase, I figured you'd finally decided to leave that soul-crushing job of yours. Marcus appeared in the doorway, holding 2 beers. I didn't think you were talking about your marriage. I took the beer gratefully, though it was barely noon. Thanks for letting me crash here. Elena's blown up my phone too. He settled into the armchair across from me, his expression serious in a way that reminded me of our father. Want to tell me what really happened? Where could I even begin? That my wife had turned into a stranger overnight? That I'd finally grown tired of being treated like a roommate who paid half the bills? That somewhere along the way, we'd stopped being partners and become 2 people existing in parallel lives? She asked for money, I said finally. Marcus raised an eyebrow. And you left because she asked for money? I left because she only talks to me when she needs money. The words came out harsher than I intended, but they felt true. 2 weeks of complete emotional shutdown. Then suddenly she needs $3,000 for her sister's wedding. Maria's getting married? Apparently. Though when I suggested we spend money on couples counseling last month, suddenly we were broke. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, peeling the label off his beer bottle. My brother had always been the steady one, the one who thought before he spoke. It was probably why his relationship with Sarah had lasted 8 years while mine was currently imploding. Dave, he said finally, I need to tell you something. Sarah and I ran into Elena last week. Something cold settled in my stomach. Where? Downtown. That new coffee place on 5th Street. Marcus met my eyes. She wasn't alone. The beer suddenly tasted like sawdust in my mouth. What do you mean? She was with some guy. Dark hair, expensive suit. They were. He hesitated. They looked comfortable together. Familiar. The room seemed to tilt slightly. Elena had been going out for coffee for weeks now, claiming she needed space to think. I'd thought she meant space from our problems, not space to think with someone else. Did she see you? Yeah. She waved, even came over to say hello. Introduced him as a colleague from her firm. Marcus's voice was carefully neutral. But Sarah said later that she'd never seen Elena look at you the way she was looking at him. The pieces started clicking together with devastating clarity. The distance, the sudden discomfort with physical intimacy, the way she'd been working late more often, the mysterious phone calls she'd taken in another room. What was his name? Alex something. Rodriguez, maybe? He seemed nice enough, but... Marcus shrugged helplessly. I don't know, man. Maybe I'm reading too much into it. But I wasn't. The signs had been there for weeks, maybe months. I'd just been too busy trying to fix whatever was wrong between us to see that the problem wasn't us. It was someone else. My phone buzzed with another text from Elena. This time I opened it. Asterisk David, please come home. We need to talk. I can explain everything. Asterisk. She wants to explain everything, I said, showing Marcus the message. Are you going to go? Before I could answer, my phone rang. Elena's photo filled the screen. The one from our honeymoon in Greece, where she was laughing at something I'd said, her eyes bright with joy I hadn't seen in months. I answered on the fourth ring. David, thank God. Her voice was thick with tears. Please don't do this. Please come home. Is there something you want to tell me, Elena? A long pause. Too long. What do you mean? About your colleague. Alex. The silence on the other end was deafening. In the background, I could hear our kitchen clock ticking. The antique one Elena's grandmother had left her, the one that had marked countless Sunday morning conversations over the years. David, it's not what you think. What do I think, Elena? I don't know, but whatever Marcus told you. Marcus didn't tell me anything that matters. I stood up, pacing to the window. You've been pulling away for weeks. No intimacy, no real conversation, no connection. And now I find out you've been spending time with another man. It's not an affair. Her voice cracked. David, I swear to you, I haven't crossed any lines. Then what is it? Another pause. When she spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper. He makes me feel like myself again. The words hit me like a physical blow. I sank back onto the couch, the phone suddenly heavy in my hand. And I don't know anymore. The honesty in her voice was devastating. David, we've been going through the motions for so long. When was the last time we had a real conversation? When was the last time you asked me about my dreams, my fears, anything that wasn't about our schedule or our bills or what we needed to fix around the house? I opened my mouth to argue, but the words died in my throat. Because she was right. Somewhere along the way, we'd become efficient roommates. We'd optimized our marriage for functionality and lost sight of intimacy entirely. So you found someone who would, I said. I found someone who sees me. Really sees me. Not just as your wife or the person who splits the mortgage with you, but as Elena. As a person with thoughts and feelings and dreams that have nothing to do with our domestic routine. Marcus was watching me with concern, but I couldn't focus on anything except Elena's voice and the way my chest felt like it was caving in. The money, I said. Was that a test? A shaky breath. I needed to know if you still cared enough to ask questions. If you'd fight for us or just write a check and go back to ignoring me. I haven't been ignoring you. When was the last time you asked me how my day was and actually listened to the answer? I tried to remember and came up empty. When had we stopped really talking? When had our conversations become purely transactional? Elena, if you wanted my attention, you could have just asked for it. I tried. Her voice grew stronger, more frustrated. I tried for months, David. I suggested date nights. You said you were too tired. I wanted to talk about couples counseling. You said we'd figure it out ourselves. I asked if we could take a vacation, just the two of us, and you said we couldn't afford it. But today you transferred $3,000 without blinking. The accusation stung because it was true. I'd been so focused on maintaining our life that I'd forgotten to actually live it with her. So you decided to find someone else to fill the gaps. I decided to remember who I used to be before I became half of a failed marriage. The words hung between us like a verdict. Failed marriage. Is that what we were? David, Elena's voice softened. I need you to know that I never meant for any of this to happen. Alex and I, we're just friends. But he listens to me. He asks about my art, my writing, the parts of myself I gave up when we got so caught up in being responsible adults. Your art. I'd forgotten Elena used to paint. When was the last time I'd seen her with a brush in her hand? I want to fix this, she continued. But I need to know that you want to fix us, not just our problems. I need to know that you still see me as more than your wife. That you see me as Elena. I looked at Marcus, who was pretending not to listen while obviously hanging on every word. His relationship with Sarah wasn't perfect, but I'd watched them grow together over the years, not apart. They still laughed together. They still had inside jokes. They still looked at each other like they genuinely enjoyed each other's company. When was the last time Elena and I had laughed together about anything? "I'll come home tonight," I said finally. "But Elena, if we're going to fix this, everything has to be on the table. No more secrets. No more tests. And no more Alex. David, I mean it. If you want to work on us, then work on us. But I won't compete with another man for my wife's attention." A long pause. Okay. I'll tell him we can't see each other anymore. But David, you have to understand, I can't go back to being invisible in my own marriage. I can't go back to feeling like I'm just another item on your to-do list. Neither can I said, surprising myself with the admission. I can't go back to walking on eggshells, wondering what I did wrong this time. If we're going to do this, we do it honestly. Both of us. After I hung up, Marcus handed me another beer. "So you're going back?" "I'm going to try." I took a long drink. She's right about a lot of things. I have been treating our marriage like a business arrangement. But she's been having an emotional affair. Yeah, the word tasted bitter. But maybe if I'd been paying attention, she wouldn't have needed to find someone else to talk to. Marcus was quiet for a moment. "You know what Dad used to say about marriage?" "What?" He said the problem with most marriages isn't that people stop loving each other. It's that they stop being curious about each other. I thought about Elena's art supplies, gathering dust in our spare bedroom. About the book of poetry I'd seen her reading months ago, the one I'd never asked about. About the way her face used to light up when she talked about her work, before I started responding with distracted nods and suggestions about practical solutions to problems she wasn't asking me to solve. I stopped being curious about her, I admitted. And she stopped believing you ever would be again. My phone buzzed with another text from Elena. This time it was just 4 words. Asterisk, I miss you, David. Asterisk. For the first time in weeks, I typed back. Asterisk, I miss you too. Asterisk. But as I gathered my things to go home, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were about to enter the hardest part of this story. Because admitting you've lost each other is easy compared to figuring out how to find your way back. Especially when there's someone else in the picture who's been giving your wife everything you forgot she needed. I sat in my car outside our house for 10 minutes, engine off, watching the warm glow from our living room windows. Elena's car was in the driveway, but so was a silver BMW I didn't recognize. My stomach dropped. She'd promised to end things with Alex. She'd sworn they were just friends. And yet here I was, staring at evidence that suggested otherwise. I pulled out my phone, thumb hovering over Elena's number. Part of me wanted to call, to give her a chance to explain before I walked into whatever scene was waiting inside. But another part of me, the part that had been lied to and manipulated for weeks, needed to see the truth with my own eyes. The front door was unlocked. I stepped into our foyer, immediately hearing voices from the living room. Elena's voice and a man's. They weren't trying to hide their conversation, which somehow made it worse. I can't keep doing this, Elena was saying. It's not fair to any of us. Elena, you don't have to decide anything tonight. The man's voice was gentle, patient. We've been through too much together to throw it all away because of guilt. I froze in the hallway, my heart hammering against my ribs. Through too much together? What exactly had they been through? But David's coming home. He's willing to work on our marriage, and I owe him that much. I owe us that much. Do you? Alex's voice carried a note of skepticism that made my jaw clench. Elena, be honest with yourself. When was the last time you were truly happy with him? When was the last time you felt like yourself in your own home? I moved closer to the doorway, staying in the shadows. From this angle, I could see them sitting on our couch, the one Elena and I had picked out together 3 years ago. She was curled up in the corner, her legs tucked under her, and Alex was sitting close enough that their knees almost touched. It's not about happiness, Elena said quietly. It's about commitment. About trying to fix something before you throw it away. But what if it was broken before you ever tried to fix it? Alex leaned forward, his voice growing more intense. Elena, I've watched you try to make yourself smaller for months. I've seen you dim your own light to avoid outshining someone who should be celebrating your brightness. The words hit me like a physical blow. Was that how she saw our marriage? Had I really been trying to dim her light? Alex, please don't make this harder than it already is. I'm trying to make it easier. He reached out and took her hand, and I had to grip the doorframe to keep from charging into the room. You don't have to choose between being yourself and being married. You just have to choose the right person to be married to. Elena pulled her hand away, but gently. You don't understand. David isn't a bad person. We're just incompatible, different. She shook her head. We want different things. I want adventure, spontaneity, deep conversations about art and literature and the meaning of life. He wants stability, routine, practical solutions to practical problems. And there's nothing wrong with either of those things, Alex said. But they don't go together, Elena. You've been trying to force yourself into his mold for years, and it's been killing you slowly. I wanted to argue, to burst into the room and defend myself. But as I listened to Elena describe our marriage, I realized she was right. I had been treating her dreams like problems to be solved rather than experiences to be shared. I used to paint, Elena said suddenly. Did you know that? Before David and I got married, I painted every day. I was even planning to apply to graduate school for fine arts. What happened? David happened. Not in a bad way, she added quickly. He was just so responsible, so focused on building a secure future. He convinced me that art was a nice hobby, but not a practical career. So I got my real estate license instead, and we bought this house, and we started building this life that looked perfect from the outside, but felt empty on the inside. Not empty, just not mine. I closed my eyes, remembering the conversation we'd had 5 years ago when Elena had shown me her acceptance letter to the graduate program at the state university. I'd told her we couldn't afford for her to be a student when we were trying to buy a house. I'd convinced her that she could always paint as a hobby. When was the last time I'd even asked her about her art? The money today, Alex was saying. That was about more than your sister's wedding, wasn't it? Elena was quiet for a long moment. I wanted to see if he'd ask questions. If he'd care enough about me to wonder why I needed $3,000 with no notice. If he'd fight for me instead of just providing for me. And did he? He asked questions. She let out a bitter laugh. But only after he found out about you. Elena, you can't build a marriage on tests and manipulation. If you have to trick someone into caring about you, they don't really care about you. The words stung because they were true. How many times over the past 2 weeks had I responded to Elena's distance with confusion instead of curiosity? How many times had I tried to solve her mood instead of understanding it? I know. Elena's voice was barely a whisper. I know that what I did was wrong. But Alex, I was drowning. I was disappearing in my own life, and you were the first person in years who made me feel like I mattered. You do matter. Not to David. Not anymore. Maybe I never did, not really. Maybe he just fell in love with the idea of me, the version of me that fit into his plans. I couldn't listen anymore. I stepped into the room, and both of them froze. You're right, I said quietly. Elena's face went white. David, I can explain. You're right, I repeated, looking directly at her. I did fall in love with an idea of you. The version that would be happy with the life I wanted to build. Alex started to stand, but I held up a hand. Don't. You're not the problem here. I looked at him directly for the first time. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe early 30s, with kind eyes and an expression that suggested he was as uncomfortable with this situation as I was. Actually, I owe you a thank you. David, what are you doing? Elena's voice was shaky. I'm telling the truth for the first time in months. I sat down in the armchair across from them, the same chair where I'd spent countless evenings scrolling through my phone while Elena read books I never asked about. Alex, you've been giving my wife something I stopped giving her years ago. You've been seeing her. David, Elena started. Let me finish. I looked at her, really looked at her, trying to see past my own hurt to the woman I'd married. When we met, you were this vibrant, creative person who saw magic in everyday things. You painted sunsets and wrote poetry, and could spend hours talking about why a particular song made you cry. Elena's eyes filled with tears. And I loved that about you. But then we got engaged, and I started thinking about our future, and somehow I convinced myself that your dreams were obstacles to our security. I turned you into a project to be managed instead of a person to be loved. You were trying to take care of us, Elena said softly. I was trying to control our story. And in the process, I edited out all the parts of you that made me fall in love with you in the first place. Alex was watching this exchange with an expression I couldn't quite read. Not victorious, not guilty. Just sad. So here's what's going to happen, I continued, my voice growing stronger. I'm going to give you a choice, Elena. A real choice, not a test or a manipulation. What kind of choice? I stood up, pulling my wedding ring off my finger. The gold band felt heavier than it should have as I set it on the coffee table between us. You can choose the life you want. If that's with Alex, if he makes you feel like yourself in a way I never could, then go. Take your art supplies and your poetry books and build something beautiful with someone who won't try to dim your light. Elena's hand flew to her mouth. David, no. Or, I continued, you can choose to rebuild something with me. But not the marriage we had. Something new. Something where you're not just my wife, but Elena, the artist, the dreamer, the woman who sees magic in sunsets. And what happens to you? She whispered. If you choose Alex, I'll learn to live without you. If you choose me, I'll learn to live with you. Really live with you, not just exist next to you. The room was completely silent except for the ticking of Elena's grandmother's clock. Alex was staring at his hands, Elena was staring at my ring on the table, and I was staring at the woman I'd somehow lost while trying so hard to keep her. But I need you to choose now, I said. Not tomorrow, not after you've had time to think. Right now. Because I can't do this anymore. This limbo where we're married but not really together, where you're testing me instead of trusting me, where we're both pretending that what we have is enough. Elena looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. David, I don't know how to choose. Then let me make it easier for you. I picked up my ring and slipped it back on my finger. I choose you, Elena. Not the version of you I tried to create, but the real you. The messy, complicated, brilliant woman who's been suffocating in the life I built for us. What does that mean? It means if you want to go to graduate school, we'll figure out how to make it work. If you want to travel, we'll travel. If you want to paint until 3 in the morning and leave canvases all over the house, I'll help you hang them. Alex finally spoke. And what about us? Elena and me? I looked at him, this stranger who'd given my wife something I'd forgotten she needed. That's up to Elena. But if she chooses to work on our marriage, really work on it, then what you two have ends tonight. David, Elena said, her voice breaking. I don't know if we can fix this. We've hurt each other so much. Maybe we can't fix it, I admitted. Maybe we're too different, like you said. Maybe I'll never be the kind of person who can give you everything you need. Then why are you fighting for this? Because for the first time in months, I'm fighting for you, not for the idea of you. And because I think we owe it to ourselves to try again, but this time as the people we actually are instead of the people we thought we should be. Elena stood up slowly, walking to the window that looked out over our backyard. The garden she'd planted last spring was overgrown now, wild and beautiful in a way that reminded me of the woman who'd created it. Alex, she said without turning around. I need you to go. My heart stopped. Elena, Alex started. Please. She finally turned around, looking at him with an expression that was both grateful and heartbroken. I need to figure out who I am in my own marriage before I can know what I want. Alex nodded slowly, standing and gathering his jacket. At the door, he paused. Elena, whatever you decide, don't lose yourself again. You're too important to disappear. After he left, Elena and I stood in our living room like strangers, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between us. So what now? She asked. Now we start over. Not as the couple we were, but as the people we are now. What if we don't like who we've become? Then we figure out who we want to be. Together. Elena picked up my ring from the coffee table, where I'd momentarily placed it, turning it over in her hands. David, I need you to know that I never slept with him. I never even kissed him. I know. How? Because if you had, you wouldn't be standing here trying to choose. You would have already chosen. She slipped the ring back onto my finger, her touch hesitant but real. I choose us, she whispered. But I need us to be different. Everything will be different, I promised. Starting now. But even as I said the words, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were standing at the edge of something that would either save us or destroy us completely. Because choosing to fight for a marriage is the easy part. Learning how to love each other as strangers is where the real work begins. The couple's therapy office smelled like vanilla candles and false hope. Elena and I sat on opposite ends of a beige couch that had probably absorbed decades of marital confessions, while Dr. Rebecca Hartley observed us with the kind of professional patience that cost $200 an hour. So you've both committed to rebuilding your marriage, Dr. Hartley said, consulting her notes. But Elena, you mentioned that David's ultimatum felt manipulative. Can you expand on that? It had been 3 weeks since Elena chose to stay, 3 weeks of careful conversations and tentative touches, and the exhausting work of learning to be married to each other again. 3 weeks of discovering that good intentions and mutual commitment weren't enough to erase the accumulated damage of years of emotional neglect. It wasn't manipulative exactly, Elena said, her fingers twisting the hem of her sweater. But it felt like I was being forced to choose between two versions of myself. The wife David wanted me to be, or the woman Alex saw me as. That's not what I meant, I said, feeling the familiar frustration that had been building between us. I was trying to give you permission to choose what you actually wanted. But you presented it as an ultimatum. Choose me or choose him. There was no option for me to choose myself. Dr. Hartley made a note. David, how do you respond to that? I stared at the abstract painting on the wall behind her desk, trying to find words for the knot of resentment that had been growing in my chest. I respond by saying that Elena had been choosing herself for weeks. She was choosing to confide in another man, choosing to emotionally disconnect from our marriage, choosing to test me instead of talking to me. So you felt like the ultimatum was justified? I felt like I was drowning, and I needed to know if she was going to throw me a rope or watch me go under. Elena turned to look at me, her eyes flashing with anger. That's not fair, David. You're acting like I'm the only one who broke our marriage. I never said that. You didn't have to. Every time we have these conversations, you talk about how I pulled away, how I stopped being intimate, how I found someone else to talk to. But you never acknowledge that I pulled away because you weren't there to pull away from. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Dr. Hartley leaned forward slightly. Elena, can you give David a specific example of what you mean? Last month, before any of this started, I tried to show him a painting I'd been working on. Elena's voice grew quieter. I'd been painting again for the first time in years, and I was so excited to share it with him. You know what he said? I already knew where this was going, and my stomach clenched. He said, "That's nice, honey, but did you remember to call the insurance company about the roof damage? Elena, we had a leak that." I don't care about the leak. The outburst surprised all of us, including Elena herself. She took a shaky breath. I'm sorry. I don't mean that. I know the practical things matter. But David, I had been painting for 6 hours that day. 6 hours where I felt like myself for the first time in months. And when I tried to share that with you, you turned it into a reminder about house maintenance. Dr. Hartley looked at me. David, do you remember this conversation? Vaguely. The admission felt like swallowing glass. But Elena, we've been dealing with insurance companies for weeks. I was stressed about the claim deadline. You're always stressed about something practical. The insurance, the mortgage, the retirement savings, the car maintenance. When was the last time you were excited about something that couldn't be put in a spreadsheet? The question hit me like a slap because I couldn't answer it. When had I become this person who reduced every conversation to logistics? That's not entirely fair, I said weakly. Someone has to handle the practical things. But it doesn't have to be the only thing we ever talk about. Elena turned to Dr. Hartley. I started having coffee with Alex because he asked me about my dreams. Not my 5-year plan or my retirement goals, but my actual dreams. Things I wanted to create, places I wanted to see, experiences I wanted to have that had nothing to do with our mortgage payment. And how did that make you feel? Dr. Hartley asked. Like I existed again. Like I was a person with an inner life, not just David's wife who helped pay the bills. I wanted to argue, to defend myself, but the truth was that Elena was right. Somewhere along the way, I had started treating our marriage like a business partnership. Efficient, practical, focused on tangible outcomes. Dr. Hartley, I said, how do we fix this? How do I learn to be interested in Elena's dreams without neglecting our actual responsibilities? That's a good question, David. But first, I want to explore something Elena mentioned. You said Alex asked about your dreams. Are you still in contact with him? Elena's face flushed, and I felt my chest tighten. Not regularly. What does that mean? He texted me a few times, just to check how I was doing. And did you respond? A pause that lasted too long. Sometimes. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. Elena, you promised. I promised I wouldn't see him. I didn't promise I would pretend he never existed. What exactly have these conversations entailed? Dr. Hartley asked, her voice carefully neutral. Nothing inappropriate, Elena said quickly. He asks how I'm doing. If I'm happy. If the marriage counseling is helping. And what do you tell him? Elena looked at me, then back at Dr. Hartley. I tell him it's complicated. Jesus, Elena. I stood up, unable to sit still anymore. Do you realize what you're doing? You're using him as an escape hatch. Every time things get difficult between us, you've got this other person validating your feelings and questioning whether we should be together. That's not what I'm doing. Then what are you doing? I'm trying to figure out if I'm staying in this marriage because I want to or because I feel guilty for having feelings for someone else. The honesty was devastating. Dr. Hartley made another note. Elena, it sounds like you're not fully committed to the rebuilding process. Is that accurate? I want to be committed. But David, every time we have a conversation like this, every time you get angry about Alex, I remember why I started pulling away in the first place. You want me to be grateful that you're willing to work on our marriage, but you're not willing to examine why I needed to find emotional connection elsewhere. I am examining it. That's why we're here. No, you're here because you want me to stop having feelings for someone else. There's a difference. Dr. Hartley interrupted. I think we need to pause here. Elena, I want you to consider whether continuing contact with Alex is serving your marriage or undermining it. And David, I want you to think about whether you're approaching this counseling as an opportunity for genuine growth or as a way to get your wife to behave the way you want her to. After the session, Elena and I drove home in silence. The autumn air was crisp, and the trees along our street were turning brilliant shades of red and gold that reminded me of Elena's paintings, the ones I'd never bothered to really look at. I stopped by the coffee shop yesterday, I said suddenly. Elena glanced at me. What coffee shop? The one where Marcus saw you with Alex. I wanted to see what you liked about it. David, they have art on the walls. Local artists. The barista told me they rotate the displays every month, and they donate a portion of sales to the artists. I pulled into our driveway but didn't get out of the car. There was a painting that reminded me of your style. Lots of blues and greens, kind of abstract but with these hints of recognizable shapes. Elena was quiet for a long moment. What are you saying? I'm saying that for the first time in years, I tried to see something through your eyes instead of my own. And I realized that I don't know what your eyes see anymore. I don't know what makes you excited or curious or inspired. I know what stresses you out and what bills you're worried about and what household tasks need to be done, but I don't know what makes you come alive. Elena unbuckled her seatbelt, but didn't get out of the car. What did the painting make you feel? Confused mostly, but also curious. Like there was something there I wasn't getting, but maybe I could learn to get it if I tried. That's how I've felt about our marriage for the past year. Like there was something there, but I'd stopped being able to see it. And Alex helps you see it? Elena was quiet for so long I thought she wasn't going to answer. Alex helps me see myself. But David, that's not the same as helping me see us. But it's enough to make you question whether you want there to be an us. Sometimes, the honesty was brutal. Sometimes I talk to him and I remember what it feels like to be excited about life. And then I come home and we talk about the insurance claim or the grocery budget, and I wonder if this is all we're ever going to be. I turned off the car and sat in the gathering darkness of our garage. What if I enrolled in an art class? What? I'm serious. What if I took a painting class or a photography workshop or something creative? Something that would help me understand what you see in the world. Elena turned to look at me fully for the first time all day. David, you don't have to become an artist to save our marriage. But maybe I need to become someone who understands art to save our marriage. Maybe I need to become someone who can have conversations about beauty and meaning and dreams instead of just problems and solutions. That's not who you are. How do you know? Maybe I've just been afraid to be that person because it felt impractical. Elena reached over and took my hand. What are you afraid of? I'm afraid that if I stop being the responsible one, everything will fall apart. I'm afraid that if I let myself care about impractical things, we'll end up broke and homeless. And I'm afraid that if I stop wanting impractical things, I'll disappear entirely. We sat in the car holding hands, both of us afraid of different versions of the same thing. Losing ourselves in a marriage that required us to be people we didn't recognize. Elena, I said finally, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Okay, if Alex asked you to leave me tomorrow, would you? She was quiet for a long time, and I could feel my heart hammering against my ribs while I waited for an answer that might destroy everything. A month ago, I would have said yes immediately. And now I don't know. And that terrifies me more than either yes or no would. I found the envelope by accident. Elena had asked me to grab her phone charger from her car while she was in the shower, and when I opened the glove compartment, a manila envelope fell out onto the driveway. The words Portland Art Institute were visible through the address window, along with Elena's name. My hands shook as I picked it up. It was thick, official looking, and already opened. Inside were acceptance letters, financial aid documents, and a housing application for graduate student housing in Portland, Oregon. Dated 3 weeks ago. 2 days after Elena had chosen to stay and work on our marriage. I stood in our driveway holding the evidence of my wife's secret future, feeling like the ground was dissolving beneath my feet. The housing application was partially filled out, with Elena's name, her current address, and under emergency contact, she had written, Alex Rodriguez. Not her husband. Not her sister. Alex. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely read the financial aid documents, but the numbers were clear enough. Full tuition coverage for a Master of Fine Arts program. A teaching assistantship that would cover living expenses. Everything she would need to start a new life 3,000 miles away from me. Everything she would need to start a new life with Alex. I heard the shower turn off upstairs and quickly shoved the papers back into the envelope. My mind was racing, trying to process what I'd discovered. How long had she been planning this? The application deadlines would have been months ago, which meant she'd been working on this long before our marriage crisis, long before Alex, long before any of this started. Which meant everything, the distance, the emotional affair, the marriage counseling, her choice to stay and work on us. All of it had been a lie. Did you find the charger? Elena called from upstairs. Yeah, I managed to call back, my voice sounding strange even to my own ears. I'll be right up. I sat in her car for another 5 minutes, staring at the envelope. Part of me wanted to confront her immediately, to demand an explanation for this deception. But another part of me needed to understand the full scope of what she'd been hiding before I said anything. I took pictures of every document with my phone, then carefully placed the envelope back where I'd found it. When I walked into our bedroom, Elena was sitting at her vanity, brushing her damp hair. She looked beautiful in the lamplight, peaceful in a way she hadn't looked in months. For a moment, I could almost pretend I hadn't just discovered that my wife was planning to abandon our marriage while pretending to fight for it. How was your day? She asked, meeting my eyes in the mirror. Fine. I handed her the phone charger, studying her face for any sign of guilt or deception. Elena, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you ever think about going back to school? For art. She froze, the brush halfway through her hair. Why do you ask? I've been thinking about what you said in therapy. About your dreams, about the parts of yourself you gave up. I just wondered if you'd ever considered trying to get them back. Elena set down the brush and turned to face me. David, we've talked about this. Graduate school isn't practical at our age. We have a mortgage, responsibilities. But hypothetically, if money weren't an issue, if we could figure out the logistics, would you want to go back to school? She hesitated, and I could see her calculating what she thought I wanted to hear. I think about it sometimes. But it's just a fantasy. It's not realistic for someone in my position. What if it were realistic? What if there were financial aid, scholarships, programs specifically designed for people who wanted to pursue art later in life? Her face went pale. David, why are you asking me this? Because I want to know if my wife is happy with the life we've built, or if she's secretly dreaming of a different life entirely. Elena stood up and walked to the window, her back to me. Everyone dreams of different lives sometimes. That doesn't mean anything. Even if they have a specific school in mind, specific programs they've researched. She turned around slowly, and I could see the exact moment she realized I knew. You went through my car. I was looking for your phone charger, like you asked. The envelope fell out. David, how long? My voice was surprisingly calm considering that my world was falling apart. How long have you been planning to leave me? Elena sank onto the edge of our bed, her face in her hands. It's not what you think. Then explain it to me. Explain why my wife has been accepted to graduate school 3,000 miles away and never mentioned it. Explain why Alex Rodriguez is listed as your emergency contact instead of your husband. I applied last fall, she said quietly. Before things got bad between us. Before Alex. I never thought I'd actually get in. But you did get in. And instead of telling me, instead of talking to me about this opportunity, you decided to have an emotional affair and let me fight for a marriage you were already planning to leave. That's not how it happened. Then how did it happen, Elena? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been using me as a backup plan while you figured out how to build a new life without me. Elena looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. I was afraid. Of what? Of you talking me out of it. Of you convincing me it was impractical. that we couldn't afford it, that I was being selfish for wanting something that didn't fit into our 5-year plan. The words hit me like a physical blow because they were probably true. 6 months ago, if Elena had told me she'd been accepted to graduate school in Oregon, I would have immediately started listing all the reasons why it was impossible. So instead of giving me a chance to surprise you, you decided to lie to me for months. I wasn't lying. I wasn't ready to talk about it. You were ready to talk about it with Alex. Elena flinched. That's different. How? Because Alex doesn't have a vested interest in keeping me here. Because he doesn't see my dreams as threats to our financial security. No, he just sees them as opportunities to steal my wife. Alex didn't steal anything, David. I gave him what I gave him because you weren't interested in taking it. I stood up, pacing to the window where Elena had been standing moments before. Our backyard looked different in the lamplight, unfamiliar somehow, like I was seeing it for the first time. When were you planning to tell me? Or were you just going to disappear one day and leave me a note? I don't know. Her honesty was devastating. I thought maybe if things got better between us, if you really changed the way you promised, then maybe I wouldn't go. But you kept the acceptance letter. You filled out housing applications. You made Alex your emergency contact. I kept my options open, while letting me think we were fighting for our marriage. While sitting in therapy every week and pretending you were committed to making this work. I was committed. I am committed. But David, I'm also 28 years old, and this might be my only chance to pursue something I'm passionate about. 28 is young. We could figure this out. I could look for jobs in Portland, or you could do a program closer to home, or you could manipulate me into giving up my dreams again, just like you did 5 years ago. The accusation hung between us like a verdict. Is that really what you think I did? I think you convinced me that love meant choosing security over passion. And I think I let you because I was scared of taking risks. And now I'm more scared of living a safe, small life than I am of failing at something I care about. I sat back down on the bed, feeling older than I had that morning. So what happens now? Do you leave for Portland and see if Alex wants to follow you there? I don't know. That's not an answer, Elena. It's the only answer I have. She turned to face me fully. David, I love you. I will probably always love you. But I'm not sure love is enough anymore. What would be enough? I need to know that you see me as a partner, not a project. I need to know that you value my happiness as much as our security. And I need to know that you won't spend the rest of our marriage resenting me for changing the plan. What plan? The plan where we buy a house and save for retirement and have conversations about practical things and call that a life. The plan where I'm grateful for stability instead of hungry for adventure. I stared at my wife, this woman I'd thought I knew completely, and realized I'd been married to a stranger for years. Or maybe I'd been the stranger. Maybe I'd been so focused on building a life that I'd forgotten to actually live one. The teaching assistantship, I said. How much does it pay? Elena looked surprised by the question. Enough to live on. Barely, but enough. And Alex? Is he planning to move to Portland too? I don't know. We haven't talked about it. But you've thought about it. Yes. The admission was barely a whisper. I've thought about what it would be like to be with someone who wants the same things I want. Someone who gets excited about art and travel and all the impractical things that make life worth living. Someone who isn't me. Someone who isn't the version of you that I've been married to for the past 5 years. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. Elena watched, confused, as I transferred $15,000 from our joint savings account to her personal checking account. David, what are you doing? I'm giving you what you need to go to Portland. First semester tuition, deposit on an apartment, moving expenses. Whatever you need to start your new life. I don't understand. I understand perfectly. You've been afraid to tell me about this opportunity because you thought I'd try to stop you. And you're probably right. The old me would have found a dozen reasons why it was impossible. And the new you? The new me recognizes that the woman I fell in love with was brave enough to chase her dreams. And if I've spent 5 years convincing her to be someone smaller and safer than she really is, then maybe the most loving thing I can do is give her permission to remember who she used to be. Elena stared at the transaction confirmation on my phone. David, this feels like another ultimatum. It's not an ultimatum. It's a gift. No strings attached. There are always strings. The only string is that I want you to be happy. Really happy, not just comfortable. And if that means you need to go to Portland and discover who you are when you're not trying to fit into the life I planned for us, then go. What about Alex? What about him? If I go to Portland and he wants to come with me, what then? I closed my eyes, feeling the last pieces of my marriage dissolving in my hands. Then I hope he makes you happier than I ever could. David. Elena, for 5 years I've been asking you to choose security over adventure, practicality over passion, me over the parts of yourself that made you who you are. I'm not going to do that anymore. So you're just giving up? Just like that. I'm not giving up. I'm letting go. There's a difference. Elena was crying now, ugly sobs that shook her whole body. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to choose. Then don't choose. Take the money, go to Portland, start the program. See what happens when you're free to be yourself without having to worry about how it affects anyone else. And what about you? I'll figure out who I am when I'm not trying to be your safety net. I stood up and walked toward the door, then paused. Elena, I need you to know something. I'm not angry about the acceptance letter or the applications, or even about Alex. I'm heartbroken, but I'm not angry. Why not? Because for the first time since we got married, you're being honest about what you want. And what you want isn't me. That's not true. It is true. You want the person you think I could become, but you don't want the person I actually am. And I can't spend the rest of my life trying to transform into someone worthy of your love. I left Elena crying in our bedroom and went downstairs to pour myself a drink I didn't want in a house that no longer felt like home. Because sometimes the most devastating revelations aren't about what people have done. They're about realizing that the person you've been fighting for has been gone longer than you knew. And all your efforts to save them have really just been efforts to save a version of yourself that never existed. Elena was gone when I woke up. Her side of the bed was cold, and her overnight bag was missing from the closet. I found the note on the kitchen counter, propped against the coffee maker like a grocery list. Asterisk, David. Gone to my sister's for a few days to think. Please don't call. I need space to figure this out without you trying to fix it. Asterisk. I read it 3 times before the words sank in. She'd left. After everything we'd been through, after my offer to support her dreams, after laying our entire marriage bare in therapy, she'd packed a bag and run away to her sister's house like a teenager afraid to face her parents. I called Maria anyway. She doesn't want to talk to you, Maria said without preamble when she picked up. David, I'm sorry, but she asked me not to let you know where she is. She's at your house, isn't she? I can't tell you that. Maria, I'm not trying to drag her home. I just want to know if she's okay. A long pause. She's not okay. She's been crying for 12 hours straight. She keeps saying she's ruined everything. Can you just tell her that I'm not angry? That I meant what I said about supporting whatever she decides? David. Maria's voice grew softer. Can I ask you something? Do you really want her to go to Portland? Or are you hoping that if you're supportive enough, she'll choose to stay? The question hit me like a punch to the gut because I didn't know the answer. I want her to be happy. That's not what I asked. I slumped into one of our kitchen chairs, staring at the empty coffee mug Elena had left in the sink. Even her dirty dishes felt like evidence of a life she was already moving away from. I don't know, I admitted. Part of me is hoping she'll realize that what we have is worth fighting for. But Maria, I found out yesterday that she's been planning to leave for months. She applied to graduate school and got accepted and never told me. How do I compete with a dream she's been hiding from me? Maybe you don't compete with it. Maybe you figure out how to be part of it. She made Alex her emergency contact, not me. That tells me everything I need to know about who she sees as her future. Maria was quiet for a long moment. David, Elena is terrified. Of what? Of everything. Of staying and feeling trapped forever. Of leaving and destroying the only stable relationship she's ever had. Of choosing wrong and regretting it for the rest of her life. So what am I supposed to do? Wait around while she figures out whether I'm worth keeping? I think you're supposed to figure out who you are when you're not trying to be Elena's husband. After I hung up, I sat in our empty house listening to the silence. This was what Elena's absence felt like. Not just quiet, but hollow. Like the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for her to come back and fill it with life again. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Asterisk, this is Alex. We need to talk. Asterisk. I stared at the message for a full minute before responding. Asterisk, about what? Asterisk. Asterisk, about Elena. Can you meet me for coffee? 1 hour, neutral territory. Asterisk. Asterisk, why would I want to do that? Asterisk. Asterisk, because she's in love with both of us, and it's destroying her. Asterisk. An hour later, I sat across from Alex Rodriguez at a coffee shop downtown. Not the one where Elena had been spending time with him, but a generic chain restaurant that felt appropriately impersonal for what was probably going to be the most surreal conversation of my life. Alex looked exhausted. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, and he had the kind of dark circles under his eyes that suggested he'd been sleeping about as well as I had. "Thank you for coming," he said, wrapping his hands around his coffee mug like he was trying to warm something deeper than his fingers. "I'm not sure why I'm here. Because Elena called me at 3 in the morning, crying so hard I could barely understand what she was saying." My chest tightened. "What did she say?" "She said she felt like she was being torn in half. That choosing you meant giving up her dreams, and choosing her dreams meant destroying the only family she's ever known." "And what did you tell her?" Alex met my eyes directly. "I told her that maybe the problem isn't her choice. Maybe the problem is that she's being forced to choose at all." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means maybe there's a third option that none of us have considered." I took a sip of my coffee, buying time while I tried to figure out where this conversation was headed. Such as you coming to Portland with her." The suggestion was so unexpected that I almost laughed. "You want me to move to Portland so my wife can go to graduate school with her boyfriend? I want Elena to stop feeling like she has to choose between the life she's built and the life she wants." Alex leaned forward. "David, I've spent months listening to her talk about you. Even when she was angry, even when she felt neglected and ignored, she never stopped loving you. But she loves you too. She loves the version of herself that she is when she's with me. The version that dreams big and takes risks and believes in magic." Alex's voice grew quieter. "But she needs the version of herself that she is with you too. The version that feels safe and supported and like she belongs somewhere." "So what are you suggesting?" "Some kind of polyamorous arrangement. I'm suggesting that maybe what Elena needs isn't to choose between us, but to choose herself. And maybe what she needs to choose herself is to know that the people who love her will support her dreams even when those dreams are complicated." I studied Alex's face, looking for signs of manipulation or hidden agenda. But all I saw was a man who looked as lost and heartsick as I felt. "You're in love with her," I said. "Yes." "And you want to be with her?" "Yes. But you're telling me to move to Portland to be with her too." Alex was quiet for a long moment. "David, I've never been married. I've never built a life with someone, never shared a mortgage or argued about insurance claims, or learned to love someone through boring Tuesday afternoons. I can give Elena adventure and passion and artistic inspiration. But I can't give her the kind of deep, steady love that you two have built together." Had built. Past tense. Is it past tense? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like a man who just transferred $15,000 to his wife, so she could chase her dreams whether or not those dreams include him. "I transferred that money because I want her to be happy." "Exactly. That's the kind of love I can't compete with." Alex took a shaky breath. "David, I know this sounds insane, but what if we stopped competing? What if we figured out how to both be part of Elena's life in Portland? That's not how marriage works. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe the way marriage works is what's been killing Elena slowly for the past 5 years." I wanted to argue, but the words stuck in my throat. Because the truth was that our marriage had been killing Elena. All the safety and security and practical planning had gradually erased the parts of her that made her who she was. "Even if I wanted to consider this," I said, "which I'm not saying I do, what would it look like? I follow my wife to Portland so she can date her boyfriend while being married to me. I don't know what it would look like. But David, she's 28 years old. She's brilliant and talented and full of dreams she's never had the chance to pursue. If we make her choose between us, she's going to spend the rest of her life wondering what would have happened if she'd chosen differently. And if we don't make her choose, then maybe she gets to be happy. Really happy. For the first time since I've known her." My phone buzzed with a text from Elena. Asterisk, "I'm sorry about last night. I know running away wasn't fair. Can we talk?" Asterisk. I showed Alex the message. "What are you going to tell her?" he asked. "I don't know. David, whatever you decide, I need you to know that I never intended for any of this to happen. I didn't set out to fall in love with a married woman. But you did fall in love with her. The minute she told me about her art. The way her whole face lit up when she described a painting she was working on, like she was sharing a secret with the universe." Alex smiled sadly. "I'd never seen anyone love something the way Elena loves creating beauty. She used to look like that when she talked about our future together. When was the last time you saw her look like that about anything in your marriage? I couldn't answer because I couldn't remember. When had Elena stopped glowing when she talked about us? I have to go, I said, standing up abruptly. David, wait. No. This conversation is insane. I'm not moving to Portland to share my wife with another man. That's not love, that's desperation. Sometimes love looks like desperation. I walked out of the coffee shop feeling like my entire world had shifted off its axis. Alex's suggestion was impossible, ridiculous, completely against everything I believed about marriage and commitment and how relationships were supposed to work. But as I drove home to our empty house, I couldn't stop thinking about Elena's face the night she'd tried to show me her painting. The excitement that had died in her eyes when I'd redirected the conversation to insurance claims. I couldn't stop thinking about the woman I'd married, who used to wake up early on Saturday mornings to watch the sunrise and paint watercolor sketches of our neighborhood. When had she stopped doing that? When had I stopped noticing that she'd stopped? My phone rang as I pulled into our driveway. Elena. Hi, she said softly when I answered. Hi. Can I come home? I know we need to talk, but I don't want to do it over the phone. Of course you can come home. This is your house too. Is it? Because lately it feels like I'm just a guest in the life you built for us. I closed my eyes, sitting in my car in our driveway, talking to my wife who was 20 minutes away, but felt like she was on another planet. Elena, I had coffee with Alex today. Silence. He told me you called him last night. David, I can explain. He suggested that I move to Portland with you. What? So you could have both of us. So you wouldn't have to choose. More silence then. What did you tell him? I told him he was insane. Are you angry? I thought about it. Was I angry? Or was I just tired of being the only one fighting for a marriage that maybe wasn't worth saving? I'm not angry, I said finally. I'm heartbroken. Because I finally understand that you're not choosing between me and Alex. You're choosing between the person you used to be and the person you became when you married me. David. And Elena, I can't compete with the person you used to be. I can't win against your own dreams. I don't want you to compete. I want you to understand. I do understand. That's the problem. When Elena came home an hour later, we sat in our living room like strangers, with 2 years of marriage counseling and 3 months of crisis between us, and nothing left to say that wouldn't make everything worse. I've been thinking about Portland, she said finally. And I think I have to go. I know. But David, I need you to know that leaving you is the hardest thing I've ever done. Then don't do it. I have to. Because if I stay, I'll spend the rest of my life resenting you for the opportunities one gave up. And if I go, I'll spend the rest of my life missing you. So we both lose. We both lose. Elena pulled an envelope from her purse, plane tickets and apartment lease papers. Everything she needed to start her new life without me. When? I asked. Next week. Is Alex going with you? I don't know. We haven't talked about it. But I could see in her eyes that they had talked about it, and that the answer was yes. Elena, can I ask you one last thing? Anything. If I had been different from the beginning, if I had supported your art and encouraged your dreams and been the kind of husband who celebrated your ambitions instead of managing them, would we have worked? She was quiet for so long that I thought she wasn't going to answer. I don't know, she said finally. But I would have liked to find out. That night, we slept in the same bed for the last time, not touching, both of us awake and pretending to sleep. In the morning, Elena would start packing for a life that didn't include me. And I would start figuring out who I was when I wasn't trying to be someone's safety net. Elena's last week at home felt like watching someone die in slow motion. She moved through our house like a ghost, packing boxes with the methodical efficiency of someone who'd already emotionally checked out. I found myself memorizing the mundane details I'd taken for granted. The way she hummed unconsciously while folding clothes, how she always left her coffee cup on the counter instead of putting it in the dishwasher, the particular laugh she made when she found something genuinely funny. All the small intimacies of a shared life that I was about to lose forever. I've been thinking about what you said. I told her on Thursday morning, finding her in our spare bedroom, her old studio, carefully wrapping canvases in bubble wrap. Which part? About whether we would have worked if I'd been different from the beginning. Elena paused, a half-finished painting of our backyard garden in her hands. I'd never really looked at it before. The way she'd captured not just the visual details, but somehow the feeling of summer afternoons, the sense of possibility that lived in growing things. David, we can't rewrite history. No, but we can write a different ending. She set the painting down and turned to face me. What do you mean? I pulled out my laptop and showed her the screen. It was an application for a teaching position at Portland Community College, adjunct instructor for their small business development program. You applied for a job in Portland? I applied for 12 jobs in Portland. This is the only one that got back to me so far. I scrolled through my email. Interview is next Tuesday. If they offer me the position, I could start in January. Elena stared at the screen like it might burst into flames. David, what are you doing? I'm trying to figure out if there's a way for me to support your dreams without losing you entirely. By following me across the country? By uprooting your entire life for someone who might not even want you there? By choosing love over fear? By choosing your happiness over my comfort zone? Elena sat down on her old painting stool, looking younger and more vulnerable than I'd seen her in months. David, you can't just reinvent yourself because I'm leaving. That's not how this works. How does it work? I don't know. But not like this. Not with you sacrificing everything to chase after me. What if it's not a sacrifice? What if it's finally letting myself want something impractical? She shook her head. You hate impractical things. You've spent our entire marriage building walls against uncertainty. Maybe because I was afraid that if I let myself want the kind of life you wanted, we'd end up broke and homeless, and you'd realize you'd married the wrong person. And now, I sat down on a box of her art supplies, trying to find words for feelings I'd never allowed myself to examine. Now I'm more afraid of being the kind of person who lets the woman he loves disappear because he's too scared to follow her. Elena was crying again, the quiet kind of tears that seemed to be her default state lately. David, you can't come to Portland because of me. You have to come because it's what you want for yourself. How do I know the difference? Do you even want to live in Portland? Do you want to start over in a new city, find new friends, build a completely different kind of life? I thought about it honestly. The truth was that Portland scared me. The job market was competitive, the cost of living was high, and I'd be giving up everything familiar and secure for a future that was completely uncertain. But Elena scared me more. The thought of losing her, of spending the rest of my life wondering what would have happened if I'd been brave enough to fight for us in a way that actually mattered. I want to find out who I am when I'm not trying to control every variable, I said finally. I want to see what happens when I let myself care more about the quality of my life than the security of it. And if it doesn't work, if you hate Portland or the job or the uncertainty, then I'll deal with it. But Elena, I've spent 5 years watching you make yourself smaller to fit into the life I thought we should have. Maybe it's time for me to try making myself bigger to fit into the life you actually want. Elena stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the garden she'd planted last spring. What about Alex? The question I'd been dreading. What about him? If you come to Portland, and I'm still, if he and I are still, I don't know. The honesty felt like stepping off a cliff. I don't know if I can handle sharing you with someone else. I don't know if that's something I'm capable of. Then why would you come? Because losing half of you is better than losing all of you. Elena turned around, her eyes wide. David, that's not healthy. That's not love, that's obsession. Maybe. Or maybe it's finally understanding that love isn't about possession. It's about wanting someone to thrive even when their thriving is inconvenient for you. You can't be okay with me being with another man. No one could be okay with that. I'm not okay with it. But I'm less okay with the alternative. Elena walked over and sat down next to me on the box, close enough that I could smell her shampoo and feel the warmth of her skin. For a moment, it felt like the old days, when physical proximity was effortless instead of careful. David, I need to tell you something about Alex. My stomach clenched. What? He's not coming to Portland with me. I stared at her. What do you mean? I mean he got a job offer in San Francisco. A really good opportunity at a museum there. And we decided that maybe what we have is more about helping each other remember who we are than it is about building a future together. The relief was so intense it made me dizzy. So you're going to Portland alone? Yes. And David, I need to do this alone, at least at first. I need to know that I can be myself without needing someone else to validate that version of me. So you don't want me to come? Elena took my hand, the first time she'd initiated physical contact in weeks. I want you to come because you want to come. Not because you're chasing me, but because you're chasing yourself. And if I do come, if I move to Portland because I want to see who I am in a place where no one knows me as the responsible guy who always has a plan, then we figure it out as we go. Not as husband and wife trying to fix a broken marriage, but as two people who love each other trying to build something completely new. What does that mean? I don't know. Maybe we live separately for a while. Maybe we date each other like we're strangers who just met. Maybe we discover that we actually like each other when we're not trying to be the people we think we should be. I squeezed her hand. And maybe we discover that we're completely incompatible and we've just been holding on to something that should have ended years ago. Maybe. But David, wouldn't you rather know for sure than spend the rest of your life wondering? That evening, I called the Portland Community College Human Resources Department and accepted the interview, even though they hadn't offered me the job yet. Then I called Marcus. "You're moving to Portland to win back a wife who's leaving you for another man?" he said after I'd explained everything. "I'm moving to Portland to find out who I am when I'm not afraid of uncertainty. And if Elena decides she doesn't want to try again, then at least I'll know I tried something brave instead of just letting fear make all my decisions." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Dad would have understood this, you know. "What do you mean?" He used to say that the biggest risk in life isn't taking chances, it's refusing to take them. Mom was the adventurous one, remember? She wanted to travel, to try new things, to live somewhere besides the town where she grew up. Dad could have kept her safe and small, but instead he followed her to 3 different states and learned to love uncertainty because he loved her more than he loved being comfortable. I'd forgotten that. You were afraid of being like them, of being the kind of couple that made impractical choices and struggled financially and had to figure things out as they went. And instead I became the kind of husband who optimized all the joy out of marriage. But you're not that person anymore. How do you know? Because the old David would never consider moving across the country for someone who might not want him there. The old David would write off Portland as too risky and convince himself that letting Elena go was the mature, responsible choice. That night, Elena and I lay in bed not touching, both of us staring at the ceiling and thinking about futures that felt impossible but necessary. "I'm scared," she said into the darkness. "Of what?" "Of getting everything I thought I wanted and discovering it's not enough. Of spending the rest of my life looking for something that doesn't exist. What if it does exist? What if it doesn't? Then we'll have tried something beautiful and failed instead of never trying at all." Elena rolled over to face me, and for the first time in months, the space between us felt like an invitation instead of a barrier. "David, if you come to Portland, you have to promise me something." "What?" "You have to promise that you're not coming to save me or fix me or convince me to be someone I'm not. You have to promise that you're coming because you want to save yourself. What if I don't know the difference? Then you have to trust that I'll help you figure it out. And what if we try this, really try it, and it doesn't work? Then we'll know we loved each other enough to risk everything for the chance to be happy together." In the morning, Elena would finish packing and drive to the airport and start her new life 3,000 miles away from everything familiar. And I would drive to my interview in Portland, not knowing if I was making the bravest decision of my life or the most desperate. But for the first time since our marriage started falling apart, the uncertainty felt like possibility instead of terror. 3 months later, I stood in the doorway of my new apartment in Portland's Pearl District, watching Elena hang a canvas on the exposed brick wall. She'd been painting again, not the careful, contained watercolors she used to do in our spare bedroom, but bold, chaotic abstracts that seemed to pulse with life. "It's crooked," I said. "I know." She didn't look back at me. "I like it crooked. The old me would have insisted on fixing it. The old you wouldn't have been in this apartment in the first place." She was right. The old me would never have chosen a loft with industrial fixtures and no central air conditioning, walking distance from food trucks and street musicians, and all the messy vitality of a city that valued character over comfort. The old me would have found something practical in the suburbs with good schools and property values that only went up. But the old me had never lived alone before. "How was your first week of classes?" I asked. Elena stepped back from the painting, finally turning to look at me. We'd been doing this strange dance for 3 months now, seeing each other regularly but not living together, dating like cautious strangers who happened to share a complicated history. Terrifying. Exhilarating. Exactly what I hoped it would be. She smiled, and I realized it was the first time I'd seen her genuinely happy since before our marriage started falling apart. My professor assigned us to paint our biggest fear. You know what I painted? What? Contentment. She gestured toward a canvas covered in muted grays and beiges, beautiful in its subtlety, but somehow suffocating. I painted what it feels like to be completely safe and completely invisible at the same time. I stared at the painting, recognizing something in it that made my chest ache. That's what our marriage looked like, wasn't it? Not all of it, but the parts that were killing us slowly, yes. I walked over to the window that looked out over the city. Portland in December was gray and rainy and completely impractical, and I was surprised by how much I loved it. The teaching job had turned out to be more rewarding than I'd expected. Working with small business owners who were chasing impossible dreams with insufficient capital and boundless optimism. People who reminded me of the version of myself I'd forgotten existed. Elena, I need to tell you something. Okay, I've been seeing a therapist. She raised an eyebrow. Individual therapy? Yeah. Dr. Chen specializes in what she calls identity reconstruction, helping people figure out who they are when they're not who they used to be. And what have you figured out? I turned away from the window to look at her. In the 3 months since she'd moved to Portland, Elena had changed. Not just her hair, which she'd cut short and dyed a deep auburn that made her eyes look impossibly green, but something deeper. She moved differently, spoke with more confidence, took up space in a way she never had when we were married. I figured out that the person I became in our marriage wasn't the real me. It was the person I thought I needed to be to keep you safe. Safe from what? From disappointment. From failure. From the possibility that your dreams might not work out the way you hoped. Elena sat down on her paint-splattered couch, tucking her legs under her. David, I never asked you to protect me from disappointment. I know, but my dad spent my whole childhood watching my mom chase dreams that never quite materialized. She wanted to be a novelist, a photographer, a dozen different things that never paid the bills. And I watched him work 2 jobs to support her ambitions while she chased one impossible project after another. Did it make him bitter? That's what I always thought. But Dr. Chen had me call him last week to ask him about it directly. What did he say? He said the happiest years of his marriage were when my mom was chasing something that made her eyes light up. He said watching someone you love pursue their passion is like watching someone pray. It's sacred, even when it doesn't lead anywhere practical. Elena was quiet for a long moment. So why did you spend 5 years trying to turn me into someone practical? Because I was afraid that if I let you chase your dreams and they didn't work out, you'd blame me for not protecting you from the failure. And if they did work out, you'd realize you didn't need me anymore. Oh, David, I turned myself into someone indispensable by making you financially dependent on my responsibility. But in the process, I made myself emotionally dispensable by never letting you see who I really was underneath all that careful planning. Elena stood up and walked over to another canvas. This one a riot of color that seemed to contain every emotion she'd ever felt. Who are you underneath all that careful planning? I'm someone who once drove 6 hours to see a band I'd never heard of, because I liked the name. I'm someone who used to write poetry that was absolutely terrible, but made me feel like I had something to say to the world. I'm someone who applied for the Peace Corps when I was 22 and got accepted, but never went because it seemed too risky. What happened to that person? He decided that love meant making safe choices. That being a good partner meant never asking someone else to take risks with you. Elena walked back to me, stopping close enough that I could see the paint under her fingernails and smell the turpentine that had become her signature scent. David, I need to tell you something too. What? The reason I had an emotional affair with Alex wasn't because you weren't giving me enough attention. It was because I'd forgotten how to be someone worth paying attention to. That's not true. It is true. Somewhere along the way, I decided that being a good wife meant making myself smaller, quieter, more convenient. I stopped painting because it was messy. I stopped traveling because it was expensive. I stopped dreaming out loud because it made you nervous. I never asked you to do any of those things. No, but I did them anyway. Because I thought that was what love looked like. Making yourself into someone easy to live with instead of someone impossible to forget. We stood facing each other in her paint-splattered apartment, surrounded by evidence of the life she was building without me, and I realized that we were having the conversation we should have had 5 years ago. Elena, I have something to ask you, and I need you to be completely honest. Okay, do you think we can make this work? Not the marriage we had, but something new. Something where we're both the people we actually are instead of the people we think we should be. She was quiet for so long that I started to prepare myself for rejection. But when she finally spoke, her voice was steady and sure. David, I think we already are making it work. What do you mean? I mean, you've been in Portland for 3 months, and we've seen each other twice a week, and it's been the best 3 months we've had together in years. She was right. Our Tuesday coffee dates and Friday dinner conversations had been revelations. Without the weight of mortgage payments and household responsibilities and the accumulated resentments of daily cohabitation, we'd rediscovered that we actually enjoyed each other's company. But we're not really together, I said. We're just friendly exes who happen to live in the same city. Are we? Elena walked over to her easel, where a new painting was just beginning to take shape. It was different from her others, still bold and emotional, but somehow more grounded. More hopeful. What is this one? I asked. It's Portland in the spring. What I imagine it will look like when the gray breaks and everything starts growing again. I studied the painting, recognizing something in the interplay of light and shadow. It's beautiful. David, I started this painting the night you told me you were moving here. Before I knew if your job interview would work out, before I knew if you'd actually go through with it. I painted it because for the first time in years, I could imagine a future that felt like possibility instead of just security. A future that included both of us? A future that included both of the people we're becoming. Elena set down her brush and turned to face me. David, I don't want to get back together. The words hit me like a punch to the chest. What? I don't want to get back together because I don't want to go back to anything. I want to go forward to something we've never tried before. I don't understand. I want to date you. Really date you. Not as your wife who's trying to remember why she married you, but as Elena who's curious about David. I want to discover who we are when we're not trying to fix what's broken but building something new. The idea was so simple and so radical that I felt stupid for not thinking of it myself. You want to start over. I want to start fresh. Different apartments, different expectations, different rules. I want to see if the people we're becoming actually like each other. And if we don't, then we'll know we gave the best versions of ourselves a real chance, instead of just trying to resuscitate the worst versions. I looked around Elena's apartment, at the paintings that captured emotions I'd never learned to see, at the creative chaos that would have made the old me nervous but now felt like coming alive. Elena, there's something I haven't told you about my therapy sessions. What? Dr. Chen asked me to imagine what my life would look like if I weren't afraid of anything. You know what I saw? What? I saw myself traveling to places that don't have good infrastructure. I saw myself writing again, even if it's terrible. I saw myself taking cooking classes and learning languages and trying things that I might fail at spectacularly. That sounds terrifying. It sounds like the life I want to live. But Elena, I also saw myself sharing those adventures with someone who wants the same kind of beautiful, impractical existence. And you think I'm that person? I think you might be. But I also think the only way to find out is to let ourselves be strangers who choose each other every day instead of a married couple who chose each other once and forgot to keep choosing. Elena walked over to me and, for the first time since I'd moved to Portland, kissed me. Not the careful, tentative kisses we'd shared over coffee, but the kind of kiss that felt like a question and an answer at the same time. David Martinez, she said when we broke apart. Would you like to go on a date with me? Elena Santos, I replied, using her maiden name. I thought you'd never ask. Saturday night. Somewhere we've never been, doing something neither of us has ever tried. It's a deal. As I walked back to my own apartment through the Portland drizzle, I realized that the most shocking revelation wasn't that our marriage had needed to end. It was that we'd had to divorce ourselves from who we used to be in order to discover whether we wanted to marry who we were becoming. And for the first time in years, the uncertainty felt like the beginning of something beautiful instead of the end of something safe. 6 months later, I was grading papers at my favorite coffee shop in Portland when Elena slid into the seat across from me, her cheeks flushed from the spring rain and her eyes bright with the kind of excitement I'd learned to recognize as dangerous to my productivity. David, I need $3,000. I looked up from my students' business plans, pen frozen halfway to making a correction, and felt the echo of that morning in our old kitchen when everything started falling apart. But this time, instead of ice water in my veins, I felt curiosity. What for? Elena pulled out her phone, scrolling to a web page with the kind of barely contained energy that meant she'd discovered something that had set her imagination on fire. There's an artist residency in Tuscany. 6 weeks this summer, studio space, all materials provided, meals included. But the application deadline is tonight, and there's a non-refundable deposit. I studied her face, the way her whole body seemed to vibrate with possibility, the unconscious smile that appeared whenever she talked about her art. This was the woman I'd fallen in love with, the one who saw opportunity where other people saw risk. When would you have to leave? June 1st. Right after my semester ends. For 6 weeks. For 6 weeks. She leaned forward, her hands clasped on the table between us. David, I know we just started, whatever this is we're doing. I know 6 weeks apart is a lot when we're still figuring out who we are together. But this opportunity is exactly the kind of thing you should say yes to, I interrupted. Elena blinked. What? Elena, a year ago, if you'd asked me for $3,000 to go paint in Italy for 6 weeks, do you know what I would have said? That we couldn't afford it. That it was impractical. That we had responsibilities. And do you know what I'm going to say now? She shook her head, looking almost afraid of the answer. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. I'm going to say that I can transfer the money right now, and then I'm going to ask if you want company. Company? I've been thinking about taking a sabbatical. Maybe doing some writing, some traveling. And it turns out that small business consultants can work from anywhere with decent Wi-Fi. Elena stared at me like I'd grown a second head. David, you hate traveling. You hate not having a plan. The old David hated those things. The new David thinks that watching you fall in love with your art in the Italian countryside sounds like the adventure of a lifetime. But we've only been dating for 3 months. People don't travel internationally together after 3 months. People who are trying to build traditional relationships don't travel internationally after 3 months. But we're not building a traditional relationship, are we? Elena's smile was slow and brilliant, like watching the sun come up. No, we're definitely not doing traditional. I transferred the money, then showed her the confirmation. Deposit paid. Now let's figure out the application together. 2 hours later, we were sitting on the floor of Elena's apartment, laptop balanced between us, crafting an artist's statement that captured her evolution from someone who painted safely to someone who painted with her whole heart. I watched her describe her work with a vocabulary I was finally learning to understand. Not just the technical aspects, but the emotional ones, the spiritual ones, the parts that couldn't be quantified but made all the difference. Read this part again, I said, pointing to a paragraph about her recent series. These paintings explore the intersection of security and freedom, examining how the human heart navigates between the need for safety and the hunger for transformation. Each canvas represents a choice. The choice to remain small and protected, or to risk everything for the chance to become who we're truly meant to be. That's us, I said quietly. What? That's the choice we made. Risk everything for the chance to become who we're truly meant to be. Elena saved the document and closed the laptop, turning to face me fully. David, are you happy? The question was so simple and so complicated. Was I happy? I was living in a city I'd never planned to move to, dating my ex-wife, spending money on impractical things like art classes and weekend trips to the Oregon coast. I was writing poetry again, terrible poetry that would never be published, but made me feel connected to something larger than myself. I was teaching students who reminded me every day that the best business plans were the ones born from passion rather than just profit. I'm terrified half the time, I said honestly. But yes, I'm happy. I'm the kind of happy I forgot was possible. Even though we don't live together? Even though we don't have a traditional future mapped out. Especially because of that. I reached over and tucked a strand of her newly short hair behind her ear. Elena, for the first time in my adult life, I wake up curious about what the day might bring instead of worried about what problems I need to solve. What about security? What about planning for the future? I'm learning that there's a difference between planning and controlling. I can save money and make smart choices without trying to eliminate every possible risk from our lives. Elena's phone buzzed with a message, and she glanced at it. It's Alex. I felt a familiar flutter of anxiety, but it was different now. Less jealous fear, more simple curiosity. What does he say? He's getting married. His girlfriend from San Francisco said yes. Elena showed me the photo, Alex beaming next to a woman with kind eyes and paint-stained fingers. He wants to know if we'll come to the wedding. Do you want to go? I think I do. Is that weird? No weirder than anything else we've done lately. I considered it. Actually, I think I'd like to meet the woman who made Alex forget about you. David. What? It's a compliment. He spent months convinced you were the love of his life, and someone came along who made him realize you weren't. That takes a pretty amazing person. Elena laughed, the kind of full-body laugh that reminded me why I'd fallen in love with her in the first place. You know what I love about you now? What? You're not threatened by the parts of my life that don't revolve around you. The old David would have been suspicious about me wanting to go to Alex's wedding. You're genuinely curious about meeting someone who's important to someone who is important to me. That's because I finally understand that your capacity for love isn't finite. You caring about other people doesn't mean you have less love available for me. When did you get so wise? When I stopped trying to be the only person in your life and started trying to be the best person in your life. Elena submitted her residency application just before midnight. We celebrated with takeout from a food truck and a bottle of wine that cost more than our old monthly entertainment budget, sitting on her fire escape watching the city lights blur in the rain. David, can I tell you something? Always. I used to think that loving someone meant finding someone who needed the same things you needed. Someone who wanted the same kind of life, the same timeline, the same definition of success. And now I think loving someone means finding someone who helps you become more yourself, not less. Someone who makes you braver instead of smaller. I thought about the man I'd been a year ago, so focused on building security that I'd forgotten to build joy. Do I make you braver? You make me believe that I can chase impossible dreams and still have someone to come home to. You make me feel like I can be both an artist and a partner, both independent and connected. Good, I said, pulling her closer on the narrow fire escape. Because you make me believe that it's safe to want beautiful, impractical things. You make me feel like I can be both responsible and adventurous, both reliable and spontaneous. 3 weeks later, Elena got accepted to the Tuscany residency. I booked a flight to Rome and started researching Italian cooking classes. We told Marcus and Maria our plans over dinner, watching their faces cycle through confusion, concern, and finally acceptance. You know this is insane, right? Marcus said. You're not married anymore, you're not even living together, and you're planning international travel? We're not married, Elena corrected. We're differently committed. What does that mean? It means we choose each other every day instead of assuming we're stuck with each other forever, I explained. It means we're together because we want to be, not because we have to be. Maria, who had always been Elena's fiercely protective younger sister, surprised us all by raising her wine glass. To whatever this is, as long as it makes you both happy. To beautiful uncertainty, Elena added. To love that's stronger than fear, I finished. 6 months ago, Elena had asked me for $3,000, and I'd given her a shocking answer that ended our marriage. Tonight, she'd asked me for $3,000, and I'd given her a shocking answer that felt like the beginning of something entirely new. The difference wasn't the money. The difference was that I'd finally learned to see Elena's dreams as invitations instead of threats. And she'd finally learned to see my love as support instead of a cage. We were no longer the couple who'd optimized their marriage for safety, while accidentally optimizing out all the joy. We were two people who'd chosen to love each other not despite our differences, but because of them. Not for who we used to be, but for who we were becoming. And as we sat planning our Italian adventure, surrounded by Elena's paintings and my terrible poetry and the beautiful mess of a life built on possibility instead of just security, I realized that sometimes the most shocking answer isn't about staying together or breaking apart. Sometimes it's about having the courage to love someone so completely that you're willing to become a stranger to yourself, if that's what it takes to be the partner they deserve. In 3 weeks, we'd board a plane to Rome as Elena Santos and David Martinez. Not as husband and wife, but as two people crazy enough to believe that love is worth reinventing yourself for. And for the first time in years, that felt like exactly the right kind of crazy to be. Asterisk, what did this story teach you about the courage it takes to choose love over security? About the difference between fixing a relationship and rebuilding it from the ground up? Drop your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more stories that will change how you see the world. Asterisk.